In a widely anticipated speech, President Donald Trump urges Muslim leaders to drive out extremists. How the United States Young African Leadership Exchange promotes women's legal rights in Malawi. And daring and bearing is the new American bridal trend. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. Now tonight we begin with U.S. President Donald Trump's first overseas trip, and the president wasted no time in assailing Iranian aggression and military ambitions as he arrived Monday in Israel, his first official visit to the Jewish state. Following an airport arrival ceremony with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Mr. Trump met with Israeli President Rivlin at his residence. Now, the two made brief statements in which the president said the two nations must work together to confront common threats.
Together we can work to end the scourge of violence that has taken so many lives here in Israel and around the world. Most importantly, the United States and Israel can declare with one voice that Iran must never be allowed to possess a nuclear weapon, never, ever, and must cease its deadly funding, training, and equipping of terrorists and militias. And it must cease immediately.
Well, President Trump spoke before talks with the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and visits to important symbols of Jewish and Christian faiths. Now, President Trump arrived in Israel after a two-day visit to Saudi Arabia, where he says King Salman assured him the Saudis want peace between the Israelis and Palestinians and roadblocks imposed against Iranian threats. Describing a war of good against evil, Trump called on Muslim leaders to stamp out extremism during a widely anticipated address in Saudi Arabia. Now, the president also laid out his plan for U.S. policy in the Middle East. More now from viewer Steve Hammond, who was with the president on Sunday in Riyadh.
Donald Trump offered a message of reconciliation along with a blunt challenge to Muslim leaders.
A better future is only possible if your nations drive out the terrorists and drive out the extremists. Drive them out. Drive them out of your places of worship. Drive them out of your communities.
Trump used notably milder language on Islam, calling it one of the world's great faiths, and downplaying the notion of a clash of civilizations.
This is not a battle between different faiths, different sects, or different civilizations. This is a battle between good and evil.
The address was also meant to reassure Arab leaders, many of whom have bristled at U.S. presidents raising human rights concerns.
We are not here to lecture. We are not here to tell other people how to live, what to do, who to be, or how to worship. Instead, we are here to offer partnership based on shared interests and values.
That is a contrast from President Barack Obama's 2009 address in Cairo, which offered a new beginning with the Muslim world conditioned on human rights.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total...
Trump's language also differed from his own presidential campaign when he declared that Islam hates us and proposed a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States. During his trip to Saudi Arabia, Trump hardly mentioned human rights, instead focusing on business deals and weapons sales.
Hundreds of billions of dollars of investments into the United States and jobs, jobs, jobs.
It is a message that is well received by some Arab leaders. The Saudis especially spared no expense to make Trump feel welcome. But it is unclear how effective they will be at heeding Trump's call to crack down on extremism, says Georgetown University's Jocelyn Cesari, who spoke via Skype.
The reality is that these leaders are themselves discredited vis-à-vis populations that have been living under very oppressive, repressive regime, that have been using as much political violence as the extremists.
Next up for Trump, talks with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel, followed by a visit to Bethlehem to confer with Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas, and then on to Vatican City to meet with Pope Francis. Steve Herman, VOA News, Riyadh.
Well, now for more perspective on President Trump's stops in Israel and Saudi Arabia, Pete Heinlein, VOA White House correspondent, joins us right here in studio. Welcome to Africa 54. Now, first, tell us a little more about the President's key message on his stops in the Middle East.
I think his key message is two things that are intertwined. One is Iran should be isolated. He's talking about getting the Sunni Muslim countries, of which there are many. 1.5 billion of the 1.8 billion or so Muslims in the world are Sunnis. And they look to Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia would like to be a leader. And the king of Saudi Arabia was able to bring almost all of the leaders of the Sunni Muslim countries to Riyadh to listen to the president's message, which was basically Iran is more their enemy than Israel, and that he's trying to re-establish, re-energize, reinvigorate this coalition that has once was fairly powerful in opposing Iranian Shia leadership.
Yes. Now, Peter, how significant is this trip, and has always been the case, a first foreign trip for the president?
Well, in the past, you can look the recent presidents, almost all of them have gone to Canada as their first visit. George W. Bush, I believe, went to Mexico, but they've all been, well, almost all of them have been in the region. It's important. Canada is huge to us. I mean, we're practically linked hand in, we're linked arm in arm with Canada. But this has thrown all the rule book right out the window, going to Saudi Arabia, the Vatican, Israel, the seats of the three great Abrahamic religions. So it's quite something. Then he goes on to meet with the G7 leaders and the NATO leaders.
Yeah. Well, we'll definitely be talking a little more about this later on.
Oh,
Thanks a lot, Pete, for joining us today here in studio. That's VOA's White House correspondent, Pete Heinlein, joining us live in studio today. Now, to the latest developments on Ebola, the World Health Organization says a fourth person has likely died from Ebola in remote northeastern Democratic Republic of Congo, as the overall number of cases rose to 37 from 29. Of the 37 cases of the hemorrhagic fever discovered since early May, 2 have been confirmed as Ebola. 3, including the latest death, are considered probable, and 32 are suspected, according to the WHO's Congo spokesman, Eugene Kabambi. Health authorities are monitoring 416 people who came into contact with the sufferers and have dispatched mobile laboratories to the zone to more quickly test people who display symptoms. Now, the affected zone's extreme isolation has helped contain the highly contagious virus spread. Well, over the past 2 years, a multinational joint task force has weakened the terrorist group Boko Haram along the borders between Nigeria and Niger and in the islands around Lake Chad. Now, in Niger, a camp opened last December in the southeastern city of Difa to de-radicalize Boko Haram fighters and their families who surrender. VOA's Nicolas Pignon had access to this camp during a recent visit to Niger and has this report.
These buildings in Difa will go unnoticed if not heavily guarded by soldiers and having barbed wire on top of the walls. This is a transition camp for ex-Boko Haram fighters. About 150 people live here, mostly ex-militants, and next to them their wives and children. This center opened in December 2016. Behind the walls, some faces seem threatening, but there are teenagers' faces too, not really fighters. Ibrahim is one of them. Boko Haram kidnapped him when he was 12. He studied the Quran for 2 years, as taught by the militants before escaping.
It was a Friday. My dad told me to go to the fields and he would join me after the prayer. 2 men came on a motorcycle and took me. They said I could become a delinquent.
Niger authorities say you cannot fight Boko Haram only on the military level, and that fighters must be reintegrated into society. A larger and permanent de-radicalization center should open in few weeks, according to DIFA Governor Dandano Mahamadou Wali.
The government of Niger pays with its own money for this center. We made lots of efforts. This complex will have an administration, dorms, etc. Not only will we de-radicalize them, but we will also provide job training, as many joined Boko Haram because they were poor.
Residents of this camp will soon be transferred to the new center, but some would rather be free. Fatima Ibrahim is 20. Boko Haram kidnapped her 4 years ago near Maiduguri, Nigeria.
I hope I will return soon to Nigeria. I was forced to marry Boko Haram fighters, and my parents do not even know I am here.
Many fighters interviewed by VOA deny any wrongdoing or minimize their participation. Malam Bukaradam used to be a teacher before joining Boko Haram. He claims he served as a doctor for the militant organization.
I left because of tensions among the group. Shekau militants and the Mama Nur ones fought 6 times. It's because of ideology. Islam is a peaceful religion. A good Muslim would never kill people.
Ex-Boko Haram fighters describe the group as weak, but say it will take years to defeat the ideology that militants spread across the region.
Juan Nicolas Pinho now joins me in studio to tell us more about efforts to de-radicalize former Boko Haram fighters in West Africa. Welcome and thanks for a nice speech there.
Thank you for having me.
Now, the biggest challenge has always been, they say, the stigma, especially with the communities. How are they dealing with that?
So right now, what you saw in the report is like it's a transition camp. So they're going to go to a permanent one, which is like 50 miles away from where they are right now. And you're right, there is stigma in the community because some of them, they're still viewed as a threat to the community, especially the men. But for a big part, women and children, they were forced to join Boko Haram. Some, they were kidnapped, for example. So I think you have really two different scenarios, especially the men versus the situation of the women and the children.
Yeah. And this de-radicalization, does it also involve some kind of counseling? Because if people have been traumatized, they also need some kind of help.
Exactly, right? And you're going to have also like religious leaders who are going to be in the camp, you know, to talk about the right way of learning Quran. They're going to have some psychologists. I mean, that's what the Niger authorities would say. And also, I think it's very important, they're going to have a job learning program because like the governor of Difa will tell you, like, most of them, they joined Boko Haram because of poverty, not because they really believe in Boko Haram's way of learning Quran, but because it was a way of making money because of the attacks and ransoming people.
And very quickly, in terms of how do they really establish that somebody's clean now? You won't go back. Do they have?
That's why they've been in the center for the past 5 months. I mean, it's very, very difficult because you don't really know, you know. But I think most of them, they left by themselves, Boko Haram, because I think the movement is kind of weak. According to Niger authorities, right now you have between 4,000 and 6,000 Boko Haram fighters all across the region in Chad, Niger, Cameroon, and Nigeria. So I think that's why they left mainly.
Thank you very much, Nico.
Thank you.
Well, that's Nicolas Pinho with a great report there. Is from VOA's French to Africa service. Now, in developing news, former White House National Security Advisor Michael Flynn will invoke his Fifth Amendment protection against self-incrimination and is refusing to comply with a subpoena from the Senate Intelligence Committee investigating possible Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election. Now, the Russia probe continues to consume Washington, even as President Trump is engaged in his first foreign trip. VOA's Michael Bowman has more.
President Trump and members of his cabinet raised ceremonial swords in Saudi Arabia as the White House attempted to parry questions about a New York Times article in which the president reportedly described James Comey as, quote, crazy, a real nut job, and asserted that pressure stemming from the FBI's Russia probe had been eased.
I don't remember exactly what the president said, and the notes that they apparently have, I do not think are direct transcript.
National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster was present when Trump met with Russia's foreign minister and ambassador. On ABC's This Week program, McMaster sidestepped repeated questions as to whether Trump confronted the diplomats on Russia's election meddling.
The intent of that conversation was to say, what I'd like to do is move beyond all of the Russia news so that we can find areas of cooperation.
Far from moving beyond the Russia controversy, the Justice Department's investigation has been intensified with the appointment of a special counsel empowered to examine, among other things, the motivation for Comey's dismissal.
And we have no idea whether there was collusion or not. Was Comey fired in a brilliantly unsuccessful effort to derail an investigation into collusion? And we'll have to see.
Media reports say before he was fired, Comey wrote memos alleging Trump pressured him to halt a probe of former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn. If true, multiple congressional committees want the memos turned over.
Nobody's actually seen these documents. I don't know where they reside. I don't know if they are documents, but we're certainly pursuing them.
I think documents will help us to ferret out exactly what's the truth and what's a lie. We've got to figure out exactly whether there was some type of cover-up.
Veterans of past administrations are weighing in.
I hope we get less drama out of the White House. We need the press, I think, to hyperventilate a little less.
Comey himself is expected to testify publicly on Capitol Hill in coming weeks. Michael Bowman, VOA News, Washington.
Well, I want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our show live on Facebook. So check us out and share our show with your friends also. And check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince McCory. Coming up, how a U.S. exchange program is helping women in Malawi achieve their full potential. Stay with us.
I am Shaka Sali, host and senior editor of VOA's international calling talk show, Straight Talk Africa.
Today we'll examine the tobacco industry.
We pretty much touch on anything that you can think of. Politics, health issues, human rights issues, you name it, we talk about it. The issues that we discuss are pertinent to most people on the African continent. A very, very rare and unique opportunity to interact with their leaders.
Well, fishing is a way of life in West Africa, a source of food and revenue. But increasingly huge fishing fleets from China and other far-flung places have taken massive amounts of fish from West Africa's waters, leaving local fishermen with much less to eat and sell. We get the details from VOA senior analyst Jeffrey Young.
For ages, the fishermen of Senegal, Guinea, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, and other West African nations went out in the Atlantic Ocean and came home with bounties of fish. The seemingly endless harvest not only fed their families, but also people throughout the region. And what sold in the market provided money for many. But in recent years, these fishermen have returned to port with little to show. The nets of huge foreign fishing fleets have swept up much of the catch, taking it to markets in China, in Europe, Russia, anywhere but Africa. And experts say a large portion of this fishing is done in violation of these nations' offshore economic zones that extend hundreds of kilometers. The magnitude of West Africa's problem is explained via Skype by NGO Greenpeace marine biologist John Hocevar.
The estimates are hard to imagine. $2 billion in lost income for West Africa and potentially as many as 300,000 jobs. So it's a combination of corruption, lack of enforcement, and just an awful lot of illegal activity by foreign vessels.
China is cited by numerous sources as being the largest foreign presence off West Africa. A recent New York Times story said, quote, most of the Chinese ships are so large that they scoop up as many fish in 1 week as Senegalese boats catch in a year. And by decimating the local fishing industry, the newspaper says this has helped fuel an exodus of young Senegalese to Europe and elsewhere. Chinese vessels steal 40,000 tons of fish from Senegal's waters every year, according to a study published in March in the journal Frontiers in Marine Science. While West African nations have indeed set up their economic exclusion zones, it is difficult to protect the zones from foreign fishing fleets, a point amplified via Skype by UN Food and Agricultural Organization Fisheries Director Manuel Barange.
It is true that certain regions, and West Africa is one of those, the principles are not in place to make sure that that system works. And if you don't have enough monitoring and enough control in your waters, vessels can actually go in and out and conduct illegal operations without the country detecting them.
To build a unified front against illegal fishing, the United States, the European Union, and 44 other countries have signed an agreement that provides protocols for fishing boat surveillance, port inspections of catches, and penalties for violators. The agreement took effect in 2016, but China has not yet signed on, weakening the pact's ability to protect fish populations. What experts agree upon is the need for even stronger penalties for illegal fishing. Also, for West African states to work with each other to increase the reach of their limited monitoring resources. Perhaps then, the region's fishermen will once again bring home a bounty. Jeffrey Young, VOA News.
Well, launched in 2014 by the administration of Barack Obama, the Mandela Washington Fellowship for Young African Leaders has brought hundreds of young Africans to America to study and network. A new component of the initiative, the Reciprocal Exchange Program, has taken 26 Americans to 17 African countries since March to work on projects with former YALI fellows. Lamek Messina has the story of one of those exchanges from southern Malawi.
This is more than entertainment. These women are teaching others about their legal rights. Common violations in Malawi include gender-based violence and property seizures. Most of the abuses go unreported, largely because of high illiteracy rate among women, currently at 71%.
We want to use community theater as a means to go out into the marketplaces and where people are, to talk with kids, women, husbands, men. What are the issues surrounding women feeling subservient to not feeling that they are powerful and can be equal in their homes and in their community?
Catherine Kutza of the US-based NGO Women's Campaign International spent 3 weeks in Malawi as part of an exchange organized by the Mandela Washington Fellowship for Young African Leaders. She partnered with YALI fellow Chikondi Mandala of the Women Judges Association of Malawi to hold the legal literacy gatherings. Female judges and lawyers explained to the women how the legal process works.
We are telling them to be able to stand strong, believe in their femininity and know that it's not a negative thing to be a woman, that even women can do as much as men do, maybe even more, and probably better.
Nsanje is among the districts in southern Malawi where women are pressured by traditional practices like removing dust, where a widow must sleep with a hired man to supposedly increase evil spirits, and lobola, an agreement to relinquish all future property rights in exchange for payment of a bride price.
When it comes to property here in Nsanje, we believe that a married woman has no share of any family property, and when she is divorced, all the property belongs to the husband.
But as the women learned, Malawian law mandates that the court shall equitably divide and relocate property during divorce. Traditional leaders attended the gatherings to show their support. As for Kutza and Mandala, they hope to continue the partnership they have forged to raise awareness about women's rights in Malawi. Lamek Messina for VOA News, Nsanje, Malawi.
Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54, 2017's daring bridal gown trends. We'll be right back.
some of the people that are detained are actually refugees and asylum seekers. They should not be detained. This is against the basic principle.
Dolorose dalla Repubblica Centrafricana che porto nel cuore, specialmente dopo la mia visita del novembre.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. Less is more when it comes to wedding dress trends for 2017. This year, brides are showing skin and loving it. Trending now are deep plunging necklines, low-cut backs, illusion necklines, off-the-shoulder form-hugging shapes, skin tone mesh, sleek minimal looks and glittery beading. Today's bride is checking out the social media for influences and trends to outshine her guests with show-stopping gowns. Experts say the 2017 bride is confident, sharply aware of the styles and what others are doing. Meanwhile, not every bride wants to take the neckline plunge. Piper Middleton, young sister of Kate Britton's Duchess of Cambridge, was married in a small English country church on Saturday. Piper, who married financier James Matthews, wore an elegant white lace gown with a cutout in the back and a full long skirt. Matthews sported a three-piece morning suit with a pale waistcoat and tails. Security was tight amid a media frenzy in which #Piper's wedding was trending on social media, but guests were forbidden from sharing pictures there. And moving on, the circus billed as the greatest show on earth has come to an end after 146 years.
Who's ready for the greatest show on earth?
Now the Ringling Brothers and Bannon and Bailey Circus gave its final performance Sunday in Uniondale, New York, 50 kilometers east of New York City. Feld Entertainment, the circus parent company, announced Ringling's closure in January, saying the wild animals, acrobats, clowns and other acts could not withstand the 21st century competition of the iPhones and the internet and, of course, video games. And that's our show for today. Now be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show Africa News Tonight at 1800 UTC and in the morning to Daybreak Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC Monday through Friday. Thanks a lot for watching from all of us here in Washington. Have a good night.
The Voice of America today is a window in which we have to see delivering the messages for contacting the people wherever they are. And Albanian people, as people of a small country, need to have such and deserve to have such information from the United States and from all